Hello, welcome
Welcome.
to All the Things. I am Monique Bisson.
And I am Krista Bontrager, also known as Theology Mom. And
This is the show where we talk about all the things related to God, the Bible, and real life.
well, we got Kevin here.
I'm just glad to be here,
All right, so we want to let everyone know, make sure to stay tuned because later in the show, we're going to have a very important announcement that you're not going to want to miss. Today is the first day of a very important campaign that we are doing this month that we want to tell you about. But today's show, oh boy, we're going to talk about Israel. Israel, the Jews, and Judaism, and it's a complicated subject. I think I put in the title something like trying to bring biblical wisdom to an impossible situation. And it seems like no matter how we tackle it, somebody's not going to like it. So we are getting pulled in every which direction on this issue right now. So we're going to try to hopefully bring a little bit of clarity today.
Yeah, and not, uh, upset everyone. I guess upset is the word I'm going to use. But it's definitely an emotional topic, and
It's become one for sure.
it really has. And I get it. Like we want to make sure that we are, biblical and on the topic and approaching it from a position of scripture first. But it's amazing to me. I think when I think about the topic of Israel, how both sides will say, well, this is the biblical position, or this is where scripture lands on this, or and yeah, I think many people are just wondering what is the biblical position. How do we arrive at a place that's clear and cares about human life um on all sides? So yeah.
Kevin, you want to jump in here?
I'm just here to be on my best behavior and to bring some hopefully some clarity to things because we always talk about it. There's a lot of, misinformation out there, a lot of things that are trying to drive people emotions. But before we do, I just want to point to the fact of my American flag hanging up there, my shadow box with my ribbons for my military service. I just want people to don't be, I don't need anyone saying my allegiances are somewhere else, right? Because that is the easy dismissal when someone doesn't align with you or agree with your point is, oh, you must be bought and paid for, or a Zionist in this case, or you don't care, you're not America first, you're Israel first. All of these things to kind of discredit where your position might be. And so I just want to establish the point that I am I am a proud American and a devout Christian, and that is my position in which I'm coming from.
That's good. And today we're going to be hearing from Dr. Jeff Meyers from Summit Ministries. His ministry a couple of years ago did some studies, some primary research on Gen Z and their evolving views on Israel. So we're going to be bringing in that research as well because they are seeing a rise among Christian young people being influenced by a lot of these views that are prominent on social media when it comes to Israel, the Jews, and Judaism. And so we'll be playing some clips from an interview that Kevin did with Dr. Jeff when we were in Dallas back in April. And then we're going to kind of add our own commentary and fielding your questions in the chat. So if you have questions, you can put those in the chat. And this is really a conversation about discipling the next generation. We're getting a lot of questions from families needing help tackling these issues. We've done a lot of content on this. I will put a list in the YouTube description to a playlist of a whole bunch of conversations we've had related to the issues. And so if we don't cover the exact thing that you're hoping for today, you can check those out. I also put a link to my blog post on 15 things that I think Christians should be able to all agree on related to Israel. So I'll put that in the show description as well. So with that, let's just start by getting to know Dr. Jeff Meyers a little bit and his work at Summit Ministries. Let's play that clip and just hear from him.
Kind of tell everybody about Summit Ministries and what you do.
Well, we are equipping and supporting this rising generation to embrace God's truth and to champion a biblical worldview.
That's awesome.
We do that through in-person programs that we have in Colorado and in South Carolina, and then we have outposts all over the world where we develop the curriculum, say for Christian schools or homeschool co-ops or public school release time programs for them to teach biblical worldview to young adults.
That's awesome.
But it, 2/3 of young adults who are significantly involved in church in their high school years no longer even attend church by the time they reach their mid-20s.
Wow.
Our goal is to flip that, and the students who come through the Summit Ministries programs get the top Christian thinkers. They have a chance to ask all of their hard questions. They live in community with other young leaders.
Yeah.
And it changes the course of their lives.
That's
Even
good.
10 years later, 90% of them say they hold strong to a biblical worldview.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Praise God for that.
Yeah, what I love about Kevin. Kevin
What-
just wants everyone to know
I just want everybody to know.
is we're America first, not Israel first. So what jumped out to me in that clip was that he said 2/3 of students who grow up in the church leave the faith. Now, I do know that studies say that some percentage of those students do eventually come back to the church, but it's an alarming number. And ministries like Summit, Impact 360, and others are really trying to do what they can to turn those numbers around.
Yeah. And I think it's really important work what they're doing. And even the numbers they talked about of the numbers of kids who go through their program who end up staying in the faith, staying in the church, it is a complete 180 from what the norm is. And so whatever they're doing, other people need to mimic what it is they're doing because their kids aren't leaving the faith when they get to college age. So.
Yeah, I appreciate Summit's work. They it's so intentional in how they are speaking into the lives of young people, and how they have their speakers speak into the lives of young people. And so, yeah, really good work. And I can see how, especially when you get a young person and when you're very intentional in having those conversations and then, walking a road with them even after, they've left, why a young person would have the grounding to stay and not to be swayed by a lot of the cultural narrative that's happening right now.
Yeah. Another thing I think is interesting is that how this issue of kids walking away from their faith is tied. It's crazy, but a lot of it is tied to the Israel issue, which we're going to get into. It's crazy. You wouldn't think these two things would be tied together, but unfortunately they are. And I think that's why it's such a controversial issue, even for Christians, and it divides so many people in our nation and across the world. And so I think it's important for us to talk about it, which we're going to get into. But I think it's just important to point that out, that these two things are tied together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you made that point. So let's start with some definitions. It's, to me, always a good place to start the conversation and looking at some key terms that we're going to be using. I think it's first important to differentiate between the Judaism of the Bible and the Judaism of today, because those are not exactly the same things. It's kind of a Venn diagram, like there's some overlap, but they're not exactly the same. And this is what I mean by that. The Judaism of the Bible, of the Old Testament, and the Judaism that Jesus was born into was the Judaism of the Mosaic Law. It included the tabernacle, the temple, sacrificial system, priesthood, and key features that provided a means by which the Jewish people could have fellowship with the Creator. When the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, so a few decades after the death, burial, resurrection, ascension of Jesus, we see that, I think, I would say that God providentially used the Romans to dismantle the temple system by destroying the temple. And now, according to Hebrews chapter 9, there is one way for humans to get to the Father, and that is through his Son, Jesus Christ, and that he is the once for all sacrifice. But after the temple was destroyed, there was a certain kind of regrouping that the Jewish scholars and leaders needed to do. To what were they going to do to preserve their religion and their culture once the temple was destroyed? And so I'm not saying that the Judaism of today is totally different than biblical Judaism, but I think it's important to point out that there are some significant differences. And I did a whole podcast about this with a Messianic Jewish scholar, Dr. Golan Broshi. If you go on the playlist that I'm going to put in the description, you'll be able to see that discussion there, where we explain these two kinds of manifestations of Judaism. And so I think that's an important first point to put out there. Do you guys want to add to that at all while we're talking about definitions?
No, I mean, you basically took, what I was going to say in terms of, rabbinical Judaism versus what we call temple Judaism. And I agree with you. I think anybody who looks at scripture and prophecy and understand what Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection accomplished, it's not a coincidence that all of a sudden the Jewish temple and the whole system of sacrifice is destroyed, because there is no need. The Lamb of God has been slain. The atonement has been made. And now there is no more atonement. There are no more lambs being sacrificed. As a Christian, we have to look at that and go, amen, right? But for the Jewish people and the people who are still following Judaism, you have to have an answer now, because you're kicked out of the land, right? You're kicked out of Israel. You're scattered across the globe. There's no more temple. There's no more Levitical priesthood. All of that stuff is gone. And so, yeah, they had to come up with some other basically system to preserve their culture and their religion. And that's where we get rabbinical Judaism.
That was just going to be, I was going to clarify that. The fact that when you say rabbinical Judaism versus temple Judaism, the temple Judaism would have been the prior, and the rabbinical is what we're in
Yes.
now. I'm here for the normal folk. I'm here for the choir. And so, I'm just trying to make sure that we all understand the ordinary, that we understand.
I think another important term to define is, what is a Jew? Because being a Jew is many things. I liken it to a suitcase. When you open the suitcase, there could be a lot of things inside. To be a Jew can be an ethnicity. It can also involve in that being a culture. It can also be a religion. And for some people, it's all of those things. For some people, it's only an ethnicity. And for some people, it's an ethnicity plus holidays. And so this is why we can have atheist Jews or progressive Jews. And this is also why we can have Jewish people who are every ethnicity on the planet. You can have Chinese Jews and African Jews, Ethiopian Jews, and so the word Jew can be very complicated. And so although we cannot have an atheist Christian, there can be such a thing as an atheist Jew. And so I think that is confusing to a lot of people. But what we are talking about is people who have a connection either through their lineage and or through their religion to the ancestors of Judaism. I don't know. What do you think about that definition, Kevin?
Yeah, I think it's good. I was going to ask you, do you think for tonight's discussion, our primary focus is on ethnicity and like lineage? When we say Jews, I think we're referring tonight in our discussion more so ethnic and lineage.
Yeah,
Would you agree with that?
I would say so, probably.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, there is this whole conversation of whether the Jews are really the Jews and whether Europeans, the Ashkenazi Jews, are really Jews and all of that. We're not going to get into that tonight, but we're saying that we recognize that that debate is out there, but we're kind of going with the more mainstream position of, look, if somebody says that they have a connection to Abraham, we're going to just go with that. What are your thoughts about that, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I just go to the book of Acts. When you look at Pentecost and you see Jews from all around Asia and Europe had come back to Jerusalem for the festivals and Passover and all of that stuff. Jews were already spread out across Europe and Asia. We could say Asia, but that's like Turkey and the Middle East. And and so this idea that all of a sudden the fact that the Jews were in Europe was some type of like, gotcha, you're not from Abraham. Like we see in the Bible, they're already in Europe. When Paul is going around doing his journeys to spread the gospel, he's going around Europe, Southern Europe, and he's going into synagogues all around because they were already established there. So this idea that because these people came out of Europe, they're not Jews, that's not a very well thought out position or argument.
So I think it's also interesting. There's a video on my channel where I talk about how the early Christians still called themselves Jews. There's a
Yes.
number of places in the New Testament where it wasn't just because they became, followers of the way or disciples of Jesus that they stopped calling themselves Jew. So that I think it's perfectly appropriate for my Messianic friends, to call themselves Jewish Christians.
Yeah,
There's
because
no,
they're ethnically Jewish.
yeah,
That-
and that they come
they're-
from a cultural context and all of that. So, all right, one more definition, and that is Israel.
Mhm.
Israel is a nationality. It is a nation state. It is a country. You can be an Arab Israeli. You can be a Jewish Israeli. You could be a Christian Israeli. You can be all of those things. You can be from Africa. You can be from China. You can be from America. If you can prove they have a process that you can go through to prove your lineage to Judaism. You can come immigrate into Israel and make aliyah. But Israel is a nation state. It is a nation state. It is a nationality, not an ethnicity. So I don't know. That's my definition. Kevin, what do you think about that?
No, I think that's good and helpful. I think I saw in the chat someone put that this is helpful. I would just also say um, because people have this narrative that Israel is a white colonial state. I think it's important to understand that, yes, you had Jews from Europe who came down and resettled in the early 1900s, but you also have to remember that when Israel declared itself a state and all the Arab nations attacked it, the Arab nations also kicked out Arab Jews in their country. And so Israel is about 9 million people in Israel today. 2 million are Arab Muslims, and of the 7 million Jews, about half are Arab descent Jews, and the other half is what we kind of view as the European Jews. So it is a very diverse place in terms of the people that are there, and even from being a Jew is not all from the European descent side or who look more like Europeans. You also have very Arab looking Jews as well.
And the Arab, you see, again, Arabs, they're on Pentecost. So Arabs were Jews in the first century, and they were among the first Christians. They're among the most ancient Christians.
Yes.
So Arab is not a religion.
No.
So, and to be an Arab is more of an ethnicity from a particular lineage.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So those are our definitions. This is how we're gonna proceed with the conversation.
I'm just taking notes so I can make sure I get it
Yeah.
right on my quiz.
And I'll just say for historical purposes too, I think it's also important to understand that Abraham came from Ur, and Ur is in modern day Baghdad. So so when we don't think that Jew and Arab is like this kind of, yeah, he took Abraham and formed a new people, but Abraham was from Baghdad. So just think about that.
I think that's a very interesting distinction. And it always amazes me when you look at where some of the ancient cities were, you know, to think that, you know, being from Ur of the Chaldeans, and Ur is like present day Baghdad. And, you know,
Yeah.
so what did that mean for that time then? And how do we think of like ancient people then today? Yeah, this is all very interesting.
Yeah.
You know what, in your conversation with Dr. Jeff, you asked him, should Christians support Israel, which I think is a lot of the conversation and question that I'm seeing through my social media feeds. And well, I also think that and maybe we can parse this out a little bit, is that when someone says, well, I support Israel, then that means I am for all the Jews everywhere and I'm going to support this. Like it becomes this conspiracy where people tend to, I think, collapse all of Israel and all of the Jews. I don't know if you guys see that, but
Absolutely.
Israel kind of becomes this umbrella term for Judaism, the Jews, and the nation state all together, and you must support the whole thing in its totality. And so
yeah.
Or hate the whole thing in
or
its
hate the whole
totality.
Yeah.
or be suspicious of it.
Yes.
So, all right.
So
go
before
ahead.
Kevin, before you respond and we talk about that, there is a clip of you asking Dr. Jeff this question. So I want us to watch the clip and then we'll come back and discuss it a little bit.
Why should Christians support Israel?
Well, I wrote a book on this topic.
Yes, you
It's
did.
called Should Christians Support Israel? And people ask me, what's the answer? I said, well, there's 130 pages between you and the answer to that question. So just go at it.
Yeah.
But the answer to the question is Christians who love Jesus and love applying a biblical worldview to every area of life should support Israel. That does not mean that we put our stamp of approval on everything that the nation state of Israel does.
Yes.
I love America. I don't agree with everything our government does.
Yeah.
In fact, that's part of my citizenship responsibility, is to say what I think, to be bold about it and bring the facts to bear.
Yeah.
But Christians should support Israel, first of all, because Israel is a significant part of God's plan for history. Second of all, Christians should support Israel because Christians support the truth. And we live in a world of lies surrounding everything related to Israel.
Yes.
And then I think third, Christians should support Israel if they're Americans because they actually love America. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about this in the show. But the ultimate target of radical Islamists is not the state of Israel. The state of Israel is tiny, 9 million people. There are more people who live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area than who live in all of Israel.
Yeah.
The ultimate target is the United States of America because of our constitutional way of life, which radical Islamists believe is in contradiction to how the Quran teaches them about Allah and how they are to live and operate their lives.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more and unpack some of this, Kevin, because why do you, let me ask you the question, why do you think Christians should support Israel? And what are your thoughts about, how would you answer that question?
Yeah. I think, Dr. Jeff gave some good answers. And some of that is going to depend on your theology. And we know Christians differ on their theology. But this is what I always go back to. When it comes to the Jewish people, I think Scripture is very clear. Not only does God have a particular affection for the Jewish people, but that he also has a future plan for salvation for the Jewish people, right? And I always go back to Romans 11. Romans 11, where Paul, if you look at the book of Romans, the first half, you can kind of tell Paul is addressing the Jews about how they view the Gentiles, right? All have sinned, right? There's no one is righteous, right? He's like, look, all of y'all need Jesus. And then the back half of Romans, he's almost referring, he's talking to the Gentiles. He's like, now don't think too highly of yourselves and think you're better than the Jews, right? And he's making this argument for the value of the Jews. And he talks about the natural branches being broken off, being the Jews. And because of their disobedience, we Gentiles have been blessed to be grafted in. Like, we're the wild olive branch. We're not the natural branches, but yet we've been grafted into God's covenant, into God's kingdom, into God's family, because the natural branches rejected. But he says, but this is a partial hardening of Israel. He said, unto the fulfillment of the age of the Gentiles. So when we look at the church today, and the church is overwhelmingly Gentile, right? The Jews are hardened. Most Jewish people reject Christ still, right? But he talks about a day when the natural branches are grafted back in, right? And so the fact that the Jewish people are still around today, and we know that the nation of Israel was created basically for their preservation after the Holocaust. Well, it started before the Holocaust, but it was a real thing after the Holocaust, right? We as Christians should care about the Jewish people and the state of Israel, because we understand God's word and his promises and his declaration that there's a future hope, and when the natural branches will be grafted back in, there will be a revival of Jews coming to Christ and believing in Christ. And so as Christians, we should care about that. We should care about evangelizing to Jewish people and to the nation of Israel. And so that's on the theological side. On the American side, it's very simple. They're our closest ally now in the whole Middle East, right? We do things together. We share intelligence. We fight wars together. The people that hate them hate us. And so to make Israel our enemy really just makes no sense from any kind of geopolitical standpoint. You can't say I'm America first, but America first means Israel's my enemy. That there's no logic or reasoning behind that, other than drinking some Kool-Aid and some misleading propaganda of people who want to drive a wedge between those two things. And that's why I was saying earlier that it's ironic that Christian faith and the relationship to Israel is so tied together. Because kids who walk away from the faith typically have a very anti-Israel view, right? And it's because of the ideology that drives that.
Yeah. We're going to get into some of those numbers, but I think I want to make it a clarification in light of the definitions that we just gave in Romans 11. I would say that Paul's use of the word Israel in Romans chapter 11 is a synonym for what we defined earlier as ethnic Jews.
Yes.
I don't see it as being a synonym for the current geopolitical nation state of Israel.
True.
And I think that that's where a lot of the confusion gets introduced. That Paul's use of the word Israel and that all Israel will be brought in Romans chapter 11 is the same thing, is that there's an equal sign to the modern nation state of Israel. And I would say, I don't think so.
No,
now,
I can say no. The nation state of Israel is a secular state,
yes,
right? Led by Jews, ethnic Jews, but it's still a secular state. Tel Aviv is very close to San Francisco in terms of culture and LGBTQ acceptance, all of that stuff, right? So this is not a bastion state of Christian or even old Jewish righteousness. That's not what it is. What it is a safe haven for Jews. It is a preservation state for ethnic Jews, is what it is. And I believe that's one of the reasons Christians should care about it.
So, so that's the first clarification I want to make. The second clarification I want to make is that what Kevin just described as the view of Romans chapter 11, basically being that toward the end of the age, there will be a great revival or quickening of among the Jews, that they will come to see Jesus as the Messiah, is not a uniquely dispensational position. It is not out of step with being reformed. Kevin is reformed. And so there was a question in the chat of, do reformed people see this as different because of eschatology? My answer to that is no. That there is a large historic tradition within Christianity that Romans chapter 11 teaches that toward the end of the age, there will be a great revival of Jewish people who will accept Jesus as the Messiah. So this charge that, well, if you support Jewish people, you're just some weird, peculiar dispensationalist, blah, blah, blah. No, that's the historic Christian position. Dispensationalism, now we could debate that. I am not a dispensationalist, classical dispensationalist. I lean more toward a historical premillennialist, which in my opinion is the best reflection of the early church in the first few centuries.
Krista, I
We're
had
gonna
no
have
idea.
to link those definitions
Yeah.
in the description.
Yeah. So I've done teaching on this in the past of the different views of the millennium. I lean toward historical premillennialism.
Same.
And so it doesn't mean I'm a dispensationalist. Those are two different things. So I want to have that clarity, because there's a lot of weird internet rumors about dispensationalism. And even if you are a dispensationalist, doesn't mean that you blindly support everything that Israel does. That is another sort of pejorative thing that is put out there.
Or that if you're a dispensationalist, you follow the Left Behind series. Like,
you got all your eschatology from Left Behind. So when Dr. Jeff says that God's plan includes Israel, I'm a little bit agnostic about God's plan for the nation state of Israel.
Agree.
I am not agnostic about Paul's use of the term Israel to refer to what we called in our definitions today Jewish people.
Yes.
And so I want to just make that clarification.
Yeah, because Paul starts off Romans 11 basically declaring that. He said, "I asked then, has God rejected His people?" Then he says, "By no means, for I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, a member of the tribe of Benjamin." And he says, God has not rejected His people whom He foreknew. And so, yeah, he's talking about ethnic Jews. Some people try to say, well, Paul, when he says Israel, he's just meaning the church. It's like, no, in Romans 11, he's explicitly saying, I'm talking about Israelites. I'm talking about my physical brothers in the flesh, descendants of Abraham. And yeah, that's the argument that he's making there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's continue to hear from Dr. Jeff. I think you asked him a next kind of follow-up question, tying together, our friendship as a nation with the nation state of Israel, and how that helps us as we combat radical Islamists, and how they target us in the West, and how they see our friendship. So let's hear from Dr. Jeff, and then we'll have you comment. These messages. Monique, did you want to jump in there with anything we said about Israel or dispensationalism or any of that?
I did, but then you guys started talking about Left Behind, and now the only thing that I can think of is the sun has
Tribulation
come
Force.
and you've been left behind. And like all of the people
Oh, Larry
who like,
Norman. Yes.
yeah, like I'm like, yeah, all those little movies in youth group. Woo-wee. I was like, Lord, the airplane's just gonna fall out the sky with cute old Kirk Cameron. Yeah. Here's a question. And I know Bob is working on some things behind the scenes. So, and it might be a little too long, but I do think it's a helpful clarification that someone's asking if you have like the 30-second answer is what does being reformed mean?
Oh, I was trying to avoid that question because I felt like it would derail the conversation.
I know, but I didn't know, and it was such a helpful answer. I'm not reformed, but I do think it was so helpful. I think there's a lot of things about the reformed tradition that I really appreciate, but we don't have to answer that question right now. I would say maybe at the end.
So Elaine gave a good short answer. It's basically those people, those denominations that come out of the Protestant Reformation. So typically you think of Reformed as being the Lutherans, the Dutch Reformed, Presbyterians, and I'm talking about the classical versions of this, not the crazy woke people that you see on the evening news, that promote drag queens, but the conservative iterations of this, and also the 1689 Baptists, Reformed Baptists, which I think Kevin would be more aligned with.
Yes.
So that would be Reformed. Okay, Bob says he is ready. So once again, now let's hear from Dr. Jeff talking about radical Islam and Israel.
From my background, one of the things I know from dealing with terrorist groups and jihadist groups is they refer to America as Rome, right? They still view things through a very ancient lens.
Right.
And it wasn't about Israel. It was about America. It was about Western civilization as a whole was their enemy.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so kind of expound on that as to like, why is America the enemy? Why is America the target of Islamic radicalization?
Well, I know you've spent a lot of time around people who hold to a Muslim faith.
Yeah.
So, but I think a lot of people who are watching, listening right now are like, yeah, I'm kind of familiar, but I don't know all the details of it. I think I can give it very quickly to sort of set the stage. According to Islam, every person who has ever been born was born Muslim, which means one who submits. You and I, according to Islam, were born Muslim. We're not Muslim now. That means we are in rebellion against Allah. The cure for rebellion, and this is in the Quran multiple times, is jihad. Jihad means resubmitting yourself to Allah. It's not like dedicating your life to Christ. It's more like recognizing that you are in rebellion and ceasing your rebellion. Here's the problem. A lot of Muslims, maybe 10% of Muslims in the world today, believe that jihad is a military command to Muslims.
Yes.
So if they see us, they don't say, really, brothers, I hope that you will commit yourself to Allah and cease your rebellion against him. They say, either cease your rebellion against Allah or we will kill you.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So all of your military experience in that realm is you being amongst all of these people who really believe that you are in rebellion against Allah, and they really believe that it pleases God to kill you.
Yes. Yes.
So if you go to a place like the Palestinian territories, and I've been there many, many times, you walk in and you ask people, is Israel the little Satan? And they all say yes, 100%. Yes, Israel is the little Satan. And then you ask them, who's the big Satan? And they look at you a little bit shy because they don't want to offend the tourists.
Yeah.
But they will admit America is the big Satan.
Yeah.
So you are exactly right. The Western way of life, based on the Constitution, which is based on the founders' thoughts as they articulated in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, and they were endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, goes against everything the Quran teaches about Allah.
Yeah.
They believe the world can never move toward 100% Muslim domination until America falls. And America won't fall until Israel falls. That's the way, this is the way people process it in their minds. And even though they're two major different groups of Islam, both of them, and they would kill each other, they both have in common the idea that Israel is the ultimate enemy for now, America is the ultimate enemy in the future.
Yeah.
So if America is the ultimate enemy in the future and Israel is the immediate ultimate enemy, it starts to make sense of some of the things that we see happening on the news. Of why nations want to, in the Middle East, have historically wanted to go against Israel, but because of the first Trump administration and the Abraham Accords, there has been some acceptance among those nations that Israel is here to stay. They've won multiple wars and that they have a right to exist. However, Iran is not down with that, and they have friends, Hezbollah and Hamas and others, that they fund that does not want Israel to exist. So much of what we are living through right now is that campaign of, does Israel have the right to exist? And our friendship with them is part of preserving the West. They are kind of the first line of defense.
Yeah. And this is what I'll say too about, so he's talking about those 10%. We largely refer to those as, the Salafist, and the militant part is militant Salafist. So that is kind of the ideological thread that sees that jihad the way that he's laying it out.
So a Salafist is a Muslim.
Yes. A Salafist is kind of like saying, it's like a denomination, or it's like saying, what is Reformed? Reformed is a type of Christian, a theological framework, right? A Salafist is a theological framework of Islam, of Sunni Islam. And it's basically compared to a, crazy enough, it's referred to as a puritanical movement. It is like a Reformation. It is saying Muslims have lost their way. They've gotten away from the Quran. And so they're doing a revival or a reformation to bring Muslims back to the Quran, which means they have a very literal meaning and interpretation. They follow the actions of Muhammad to a T. And if you know anything about Muhammad's life, you know that Muhammad was a warlord. He was a militant. He had an army. He conquered. So if you're going to follow in the footsteps of Muhammad, what does that look like? Right. And so that's where you get the militant Salafist from. And so I will say this, that because you talked about how these countries have made peace with Israel. Well, the Salafists would say, because the leaders of these countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Egypt are just Western puppets who have betrayed Islam, right? So there's even a split there. The one nation that is all on board still was the Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic. But all that to say is that every Muslim doesn't think like this, but the strand that does is very committed. That's where you find Hamas. Hamas is from that theological framework, and Hamas had it in their charter when they were founded, is their whole goal was the destruction of this Jewish state. It wasn't a two-state solution. It wasn't a peace agreement. Their goal was the destruction of the Jewish state. And so I think that's important for people to realize, and especially in the West, because in the West, we tend to think that everyone is just like us. They think like us. They believe like us. And we don't stop to think about things from their perspective, right? And so from their perspective, they are destined by Allah to destroy the Jewish state. It's prophesied. They're going to destroy the Jews. And every time they try, they fail. And every time they fail, they cry victim.
Well, that's
And
the
that's
thing.
what yeah.
That's a very important point, because when I said earlier, Israel has fought multiple wars and won. And I feel like
Yes.
this is what a lot of people miss. It's not like the UN just gave Israel some land and that was the end of it. That's not what happened. Like that was kind of the push forward. Zionism was a growing sympathy and movement as a secular movement starting in the 1800s. But after the Second World War and the Holocaust, it was like, okay, let's, as the UN, create a safe harbor for Jewish people. All right, that's what we're going to do. Gave them some land. You know, we could debate whether or not that was the most just thing to do or whether it was executed in the best way. We could have all those conversations. But I think that what's lost on people is that Israel fought a war for that land, and they went up against multiple countries that were their neighbors and defeated them, and then defeated them again in the 60s, and then defeated them again and again and again. And so it's like any other country, we would say, look, they've won the war. This is what is. Like it or not like it, this is what is. And
I'll say this too, Krista. I think I want to add this, that given Israel's success in those wars, when they should, by all logic, they should not have won those wars. It only added to the mythology of God is behind this, and God is doing something here. Or God's hand is on Israel and on these people, and this is, God's doing. It only led to the growth of that, because especially talk about like the 6-Day War and all of these wars where Israel has just gotten attacked by multiple countries at the same time from multiple directions, and they defeated all of them. And that has helped grow the mythology around the nation of Israel.
So let me ask this. So we heard you guys talking about, like, the most important in like the imminent situation would be to get rid of Israel, and then next would be America, the West. But there are so many young people who are jumping on this bandwagon of down with the Jews and Israel, and collapsing Israel and collapsing them with the Jews and things like that, and this full on support of anything anti-Jew. Do you think they just don't know that, like, we need to get rid of Israel so then they can come and get rid of you? Or is it part of something bigger? The more I hear you guys talk, the more I continue to think about things like the Red Green Alliance and all of that. And that's way too much to get into for this show. But I do think a question that I get all the time in regards to critical theory things is, well, do you think they just don't know? But now when I'm listening to this conversation, and young people who are just so on board with things that are anti-Israel, anti-Jew, do you think they just don't know that, what the end goal is?
I think we have to get into the Red Green Alliance because it plays a big part in this. It does, because you mentioned critical theory. So when I talked about young people why do young
Krista
people walk away from...
look at her smirk on her face. She's like, why they gotta go there? But I'm like,
why'd I let these two people on here?
I'm saying, like, why do young people walk away from the faith when they go to college, and why is it tied to Israel? It is because of the critical theory and the colonial theory and all of this stuff, right? And they get painted with this view of Israel as a white, oppressive, colonial apartheid state, right? And it becomes a social justice issue.
Yes.
But this is the thing. So I talked about how Israel defeated their enemies in Egypt and Jordan and Syria and Lebanon and Iraq. Well, what people need to realize is, I always say the Cold War never ended, y'all. America supported Israel. The West, Europe supported Israel. Who supported all those Arab countries? It was the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was funding and supplying Egypt with weapons and arms and so this push in this front it has never ended. And so that whole red-green alliance, the red meaning communist and the green meaning Islamic, it goes way back, even around this fight around Israel. And so when you move it from a battlefield perspective and you move it to an ideology of the university and the classroom, it's still the same battle, right? And so young people are getting indoctrinated with this false narrative about Israel being this white colonial apartheid state that is killing the brown Palestinians, and even good, well-meaning Christians fall for this narrative in terms of, oh, it's the poor people, and and Israel is just this evil, expansionist minded country. And the thing is, Israel isn't. Israel accepted a small sliver of land and said, we will take it. And they took that little piece of land, and they didn't take it from people. They took what the UN gave them from the when they sliced it up, and they said it's a small piece, but we'll take it. The minute they said we'll take it, we're declaring ourselves a state, the Arab nation says not over our dead bodies, and they attacked them. And whenever they attacked Israel, Israel gained territory and land from defeating them, right? And not only that, this is what people don't talk about. They're talking about the displacement and the Nakba, and the Palestinian people lost their land. What they don't tell you is that those Arab countries told those Palestinians to leave. They told those Arabs, because they weren't Palestinians, they told those Arabs to leave, to move, to get out the way, because we're going to go destroy Israel, and then once we do, you can go home. Well, what happened when you lose? And now those people can't go home, right? That's what they don't want to talk about. Right. And so young people don't really know and understand the real history, or even today, the way they report the news about the war in Gaza. Right. They throw out words like genocide. I remember the first instance, as soon as the war started, they claimed that Israel had bombed the hospital and killed 500 people. And then a video came out of a Hamas rocket misfiring and falling down and hitting, it didn't even hit the hospital. It landed in the parking lot of the hospital. And yet the news ran with Israel strikes hospital, 500 killed, because that's what Hamas said. And that's what people just run with, and they believe those things, right? They talk about genocide, but no one looks at the numbers and say, is a genocide really happening? They simply go off their TikTok, they go off their social media feeds, and they don't realize that war is about propaganda. War is about public opinion, because public opinion shapes public and international pressure, right?
So
and we just have a lot of people falling for that.
We're going to talk more about propaganda and information.
Okay.
I want to take a quick time out. I can't believe we're already in an hour. This is like the slow train today.
This is turning to informed takes.
Yeah. But
and now we talking about the Red Green Alliance. I feel like I can just ease on in the room. I'm
not
ready.
Black church.
It can be. I got a tambourine.
So I want to take a quick break and let people know about our campaign, our mid-year campaign that started today. Here's Monique to tell us more about that.
Hey family, at the Center for Biblical Unity, the month of June is the time of year where we do a bit of extra fundraising to make sure we can finish this year strong and keep the ministry moving forward. The theme for this year's mid-year fundraising campaign is Grow the Family. We are looking to grow our family of donors and church partners who believe that the gospel message actually offers a better hope for unity than culture ever will. When you give to the Center for Biblical Unity, you are helping us to produce biblical teaching resources, you're funding podcasts, you're supporting us as we equip churches navigating through tough conversations on matters related to race, justice, and unity. You're also helping us to get the Los Angeles Statement on Race, Justice, and Unity into the hands of people across this nation. For this year's fundraising campaign, we have two main goals. We want to bring 30 new members into our Inner Circle donor community. Our Inner Circle is our family of monthly recurring donors who give at the $100 level. And we want to grow that community by 30 new members and bring 3 new church partners into our church partnership community. Now, while we have very real goals, we also want to give back to you. For your gift of any amount, you will receive 2 presentations. The first is from our 2025 Birmingham Conference on Justice. The second is our conversation on critical immigration studies. When you get $50 or more, you will receive a Petty Mo mug. And if you give $100 or more, we will send you our Spicy Christian t-shirt. This is my favorite shirt. I wear it all the time because I love to tell people that, hey, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus, but I also add a dash of spice. Now, joining our Inner Circle community, you will receive our Spicy Christian t-shirt, but you'll also receive all of the other perks that come along with joining our Inner Circle community. For more information on the Center for Biblical Unity's mid-year campaign, please go to centerforbiblicalunity.com and prayerfully consider how you can partner with us today. Bye, family.
All right, we'd love to have you join our Grow the Family campaign. Maybe you're already a monthly partner. Maybe the Lord has blessed you and you want to up your giving a little bit to the $100 a month level. That would be awesome and amazing. But we're also very appreciative of one-time gifts, or if you want to show a little bit about the ministry to your pastor and encourage them about partnership, they can reach out to Kevin for more information. Everything's on the website. You can get connected with us. Okay, back to the episode. All right, I want to get into the research.
Wait, hold on. Before we get into that, I want to
Sure.
address Becky W571. There was a question, and you and I both wrote in, "Hey, can you write a little something more?" And Becky wrote Deuteronomy 12:5. Becky, none of us have our Bibles like open with us. So if you, and I don't know that any one of us, like they might. Okay, I'm not the one to just be out here quoting Deuteronomy like off the top of my head. If you can just like write a little bit more clearly what your question is, that would be awesome, because then we can address it. I don't want you to think that we're just ignoring you. So I want to make sure that your question can get addressed. And that was it. Sorry, Krista, go ahead.
That's okay. All right, I want to get back to our conversation with Dr. Jeff and talk about the research and talk about some of the things that they found in their research about Gen Z when it comes to their beliefs about Israel. And he makes a very kind of shocking claim that Gen Z is the most anti-Semitic generation, and that a high percentage believe that Israel doesn't even have the right to exist, which leads me to all kind of questions of how did we get here? But
it leads me back to the Red Green Alliance.
So let's hear from Dr. Jeff, and then we will give our take on it.
I know you guys did a poll, and what came out of that was that Gen Z is the most anti-Semitic generation we've ever had. Kind of help us understand, how do we get here? Like, why is that the case?
Yeah, it was about 50% of Gen Zers said that they do not believe Israel has a right to exist. The other part of the poll, the reason we did the poll initially was we found that the Harvard University CAPS poll said that 60% of young adults in the United States of America said that Hamas was justified in slaughtering Israeli men, women, and children. They were justified, 6 in 10. Now, that number backed off a little bit after the October 7th, 2023 terrorist attacks, but it's back up now. And there are 3 different ways you have to process it. People who are on the left hate Jews because Israel, they say, is colonialist.
Yes.
They colonized in that area. It's an apartheid state. America's an apartheid state as well. America's a colonialist state as well, but America's too big to tear down, so we can tear down Israel, and that will prove our point.
Yeah.
Okay, that we are morally virtuous in believing that Israel has no right to exist because they didn't exist there before. Now, it's a crazy argument. There are people from 85 different countries who live in Israel, or 103 different countries speaking 85 different languages. It is as far from a colonialist empire as you will ever find anywhere in the world. None of the Muslim countries in the world, by the way, are diverse in that way. Not nearly that diverse. Okay, but that's that's sort of the way they process it on the left. People on the right are anti-Semitic, probably because it's just the world's oldest prejudice. There are 194 nations in the world. The only socially acceptable prejudice in all 194 of those nations is hating Jews. So the people on the right, whereas the people on the left think about it as a colonial issue, the people on the right think about it as a conspiracy issue. Okay? So everything is a conspiracy. The Jews run the entire world. They're secretly doing this. And the reason we know that they're secretly doing it is because there's no evidence for it. Therefore, it
must be true.
It must be true. So then there's a third group, and that's Christians. Whereas the people on the left are anti-Israel or anti-Jewish because of colonialism, the people on the right are anti-Israel because of conspiracy. There are many Christians who are anti-Israel because of the church. They say that the church replaced Israel, that Israel and specifically Jewish people no longer have any role to play in God's plan for the world. Those are the three reasons why. And it depends on where you're coming from politically and religiously, but it does seem like a lot of Christians just kind of want to get in on the act. Right? This is the one thing that can bring us all together, is that we all hate Jews. That's how they see it.
And it's amazing that this tiny group of people catches all of this kind of hate from
12 million people in the entire world.
Yeah.
So there are 120 Muslims in the world for every Jew.
All right, Kevin, that's quite a statistic you gave there at the end of there's 120 Muslims for every Jew. And, that's pretty stark. I think that when we're thinking about the rising generation, I appreciated Dr. Jeff's point of like why people have these suspicions about Jewish people or Israel can vary depending on their political perspective and where they're coming from.
And I thought he did a great job of explaining that, because that's kind of what we see, especially the left, and that's what we're talking about, the Red Green Alliance. Your kid goes to college, and all of a sudden your kid comes back. Not only do they disavow their faith, but all of a sudden now they're anti-Israel as well. And then on the Christian right, it is largely due to replacement theory, which replacement theory, and also this, I would call it somewhat childish understanding of the Jews killed Jesus, right? As if they don't understand, number one, prophecy. Number two, not every single Jew, was responsible for that. The first Christians were Jews. Jesus was a Jew. Like, trying to label the Jews with this label of the Jews killed Jesus, therefore we are against the Jews, as if somehow the Jews are uniquely evil in society or in the world. It just doesn't have a lot of biblical support. It just doesn't.
Now they would say, their rejoinder to that would say, well, they're not against biblical Jews, but they don't call them Jews. They would say the Jews today are different than. That's why they would say Jesus wasn't a Jew. Is it because the Jews today is a different group, different circle.
It's not the Jews. The Jews, and we know this because of Paul's declaration about the future plan for the Jews. The Jews did not wipe off the face of the earth. The Jews did not disappear. The Jews are still here today.
And that we think that God has a plan for them,
Yes.
as we talked about Romans 11 earlier. But I think that this whole business about replacement theology, that's another kind of weird, at times goes into weird places in the conversation, just on the other end of the weird places that sometimes dispensationalism goes to. Like, there's these two extremes, and even amillennialists are not anti-Jew. Like, that's not inherent in the system of amillennialism. Even though they think that the people of God consists of the church, a sane, biblically minded amillennialist will tell you, well, the church consists of the people of the nations, and some of those people are Jews, and that there are Catholics, who a mainstream Catholic position is that Romans 11 still has a plan to bring in Jewish people toward the end, that there will be a great revival. I mean, these are mainstream biblical concepts. But if you go on social media, you see these two extremes of extreme dispensationalism and extreme replacement theology, and it's peculiar. But really, the historic position has been the people of God consist largely of Gentiles. There are some Jews, and we've seen just since the Jesus movement in the 60s in particular, a doubling of how many Jewish people believe in Jesus as the Messiah. And there are more Jews today that believe in Jesus as the Messiah, I think, than there's been in history since the book of Acts. Like, you could say that we could be possibly at the beginning of a revival among Jewish people having their eyes open to who Jesus really is.
Yeah. And I think, that's something that we should, rejoice in as Christians. But I'll just say that either you're a Jew or you're a Gentile. Those are the two groups the Bible describes people.
Those are the two things available. Yeah.
Yes. And it's the thing. If you are a Gentile, and I'm going to say this to my white Christian nationalist people out there, if you are not Jewish, you are a Gentile. And if you are a Gentile, you are an unnatural branch grafted into God's covenant. If you are in God's covenant. But do not think highly of yourself. Do not think highly of your ethnicity or your heritage. You are an unnatural wild olive branch grafted in. The Jews are the natural branches, and you should not be haughty towards the natural branches, because only by their rejection do you benefit to get grafted in. And that was Paul's whole point, was mutual appreciation for one another, right? No one should be poking their chest out. No one should be thinking they're high and mighty. The Jews had the oracles of God and completely missed the Messiah. Gentiles, you were dead in your sins and trespass and lost. You are far off and have now been brought near, and it's due to their rejection, right? And so that is the way we should approach this thing. This whole, all the Jews, and it's such, I use the word childish, but it's just childish. It's because it's rooted in pride and self-importance. And it's like, no, just look what God said in his word, and look what God is doing. Trust God in his sovereignty and his providence. That's all we're saying, right? And we can say, oh, this is how it's going to play out, and all of these. We don't know how it's going to play out. We could be around for another 2,000 more years. We don't know. But this idea from Christians that we are to be turn our nose up at Jews, or even as Americans, as someone who has served in the military, I can tell you, Israel is not our enemy. They are a ally nation against our enemies. And this is what I'll say. Isn't it ironic that those who all of a sudden convince us that Israel is our enemy, all of a sudden become very Islamic apologists. They become very apologetic, apologists for Iran. In some kind of way, they end up on Russian TV and vacationing in Russia. It's like it's such a coincidence that the anti-Israel also leads to pro enemies of America, but under the banner of America first. It is so backwards in thinking, right? And that's why I brought the Red Green Alliance up. Who were the people supporting the Arabs against Israel? It was the Soviet Union. Where is Candace Owens right now? She's in Russia.
You had to do that, didn't you, Kevin?
I did. Because I want people to see it. I want people who are listening and who follow her, who might follow our channel, to realize this woman has been gotten. Tucker Carlson has been gotten. This idea that Russia's this Christian bastion of it's just nonsense. It is the same Soviet Union tactic that exists today. Vladimir Putin is an ex-KGB agent. Like, nothing has changed. It hadn't changed. It's the same fight that's been going on forever. And now you got Christians on the right who used to kind of be aware of these things. We kind of followed Reagan, and we were kind of aware and fighting the Cold War and understood that civilization hinged on who would win this fight between these two worldviews. And now we got Christians up here going like, man, Russia's pretty cool. Like, what? No. And all of a sudden, Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson are Islamic apologists and talking about, man, my Muslim friends are, don't want to destroy America. And it just makes no sense. But some kind of way, Israel's the enemy. It just makes zero sense, and it doesn't live in reality. And so whether you have a theological position on Israel or you're just simply looking at it from a geopolitical position, Israel is not the enemy of America. Israel, you could say they need us. Israel wants us to be strong because we're allies. We protect them. We have arms deals with them. They are not trying to bring the downfall of America. But yet the people in Iran who scream death to America, they're cool. Make it make sense, y'all. Make it make sense.
Someone on the stream doesn't like you, Kevin.
No, I think
really? Let me pull it up.
I think it's interesting that you brought up Tucker and Candace and how the people who, are now cool are the ones who are yelling death to America and things like that. I actually, I was speaking to a group of young people recently, and they held more of this view, like the Jews killed Christ, and
just a second, Monique. I'm going to give this gentleman, because I went on his channel, Ben and Sorry, I'm giving you a warning. If you want to be here, that's fine. But I will have my moderators block you if you're not civil. And right now, you're not engaging in useful discussion. If you want to have useful discussion, that's cool. But you're coming crazy, and we don't do the crazy here. So.
I'm slandering Christians. Did he make that argument when Tucker Carlson? Who did Tucker Carlson say he hates more than anybody? More than anybody in the world. He said he hates Zionist Christians. Christians who support Israel is who Tucker Carlson said he hates more than anybody in the world. I really hope he did a show on that, telling Tucker calling out and slandering Christians. He used the word hate. That's a strong, I'm not saying anything out of context or wrong. The man says he hates Christians who support Israel more than anybody in the world. Over Muslims, over Islamic terrorists, over jihadists, over a corrupt feudal system in Russia where Vladimir Putin kills every political enemy to stay in power. The people he hates more than anybody is Christians who support Israel. Now make that make sense. Make that make sense, and then come at me. But don't come at me because I'm slandering Christians if you're silent on that. I'm trying to enlighten you. I'm trying to give you a biblical response and an informed geopolitical response. Those people know nothing. Candace Owens knows nothing about geopolitics. Neither does Tucker Carlson, and neither does a lot of these people who you might be listening to on these issues of whether or not Israel is an ally to the United States. I'm just trying to be honest with you. I don't have a theological affection for the nation state of Israel. I have a theological affection for what is true. That's all I care about. What is true? What are the facts? And I can tell you right now, if you listen to those people, they are lying to you. And they're lying to you for either their own pockets, their own ratings, or because they're ideologically gone. But anybody who tells me that the nation of Iran is cool, that Russia is cool, and who can do a sit-down interview with Vladimir Putin and be friendly, can do an interview with the president of Iran and be friendly, and the person you go at is Ted Cruz because he supports Israel, that shows me where your heart is. And it shows me you're also intellectually dishonest. And so that's all I got to say. You can say generational, and I'm not a boomer. I'm a millennial. So you can say what you want, but you're going to be wrong. Know what you're talking about before you get in our chat talking this nonsense.
I wish I had me some popcorn. I'm just here for the normal folk, okay?
I'm just saying this isn't difficult. This is not difficult. There is no way.
Why does this topic so triggering for people?
I don't know. I'm so glad that you asked why is it so triggering?
Because it's so triggering. Like we talk all kind of controversial topics on this show, but people get more triggered about this topic. And no matter how fair we lay out the definitions and being careful, and then people come on here and they set sail on the ocean of emotion, and it's very frustrating.
So I think, because I've been like literally just crafting a little list of why is this so triggering, and why is it so triggering to young people? One, they're discipled by social media. The Candace Owens, the Tucker Carlson, this is where I was going to go before you addressed his comment, is that I have heard this as I speak to young people, especially this year, as I've had conversations with young people. They're like, but they said, and when they say they said, they're talking about the Tucker Carlsons, and they're talking about Candace Owens, and what's the other girl? Megyn Kelly, like,
and Nick Fuentes.
Yeah. Oh, Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes, I would say more the boys that I've talked to, but it is that type of social media that they are listening to. And in fairness, I would say Megyn Kelly's name has only come up probably twice out of the kids that I've talked to. But one, there's that. I would say two is that they don't have a living memory of something like 9/11. And so when you don't have that living memory of 9/11, you don't remember where you were when you saw this, well, then it's easy to be able to say, well, these are actually the good guys, and to be able to excuse the things that they're doing. I would say the third thing that is really promoting this idea is that the young people that we talk to today, I would say this Gen Z crowd, even your younger, very in group of millennials, have all been raised in this oppressed oppressor narrative. Now, whether you're looking at it as the oppressed oppressor from more of the left side, or when you now take this oppressed oppressor category and you apply it to the right, it's still that we have had a culture that is baked in this oppressed oppressor narrative. And when that goes forward, to me, that is just the thing that continues to allow this conversation to grow, but it also does not allow for any true conversation, or for truth, the real truth that you're talking about, Kevin, for that to be explored, because everything is now about how people have oppressed, or how people have oppressed the little guy, or how they're going after the big people. They want to replace people and things like that because of the power that they have. But it's all coming down to a power framework. I don't know.
It is. And it's
how it sits in my mind.
Yeah, and that's why we laid the definitions out at the beginning, because one of the mistakes people make is they conflate anybody who is ethnically Jewish with the nation state of Israel, and also with like the religion of Judaism, right? So they'll find out Karl Marx was Jewish, Or they'll find out that a lot of influential people in progressivism are Jewish, and they'll say, "Oh, the Jews." And it's just this blanket waiver of this is what the Jews are doing. The Jews are so like we talk about critical theory. We know about the Frankfurt School and Herbert Marcuse and all of those guys came out. We know they were a lot of them were ethnically Jewish. They were also secular and atheists. I care more about their ideology than their ethnicity, right? Because there are a lot of Jews who aren't secularists and atheists. There are a lot of Jews who are very conservative and religious, right? And so trying to paint this picture that, oh, this is the Jews. No, this is Marxist ideology. That's what I care about, right? And so painting this thing as, oh, the Jews are trying to bring down America and then equating Marx with like the current nation state of Israel. It just makes no sense with lumping all of this stuff together. And so what I hope people realize, this is what I have been trying to get people to understand. Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens know nothing about what they're talking about. And they're intentionally manipulating and lying to people. And then, but like this, there's no coincidence that Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens shows are played on Russian state television. That's not a coincidence, right? They are singing a different tune for a reason, and they're singing the tune of America's enemies. And I don't know if this person's ever heard me talk about this or the things I've written on this, but this is what they need to understand. I've talked about it before. What Candace and Tucker are trying to push is American isolationism disguised as America first. So is Nick Fuentes, right? And they're saying Israel pulls us into these wars for their own benefit. And therefore, we need to, and so they're trying to lessen the relationship between us and Israel so that we can stop getting pulled into wars. Right? It's just American isolationism. But what they don't realize is the people who want to push that are the people in which they are now siding with, which are the enemies of America. It is Iran, it is Russia, it is China. And why? Because when America, the world's biggest and only true superpower, is pulled off the world stage, someone else fills that power vacuum, right? It's going to be China, it's going to be Russia, and it would have been Iran if we hadn't just taken out their leadership. But that's what their plan was, to force America to withdraw within its borders. And I can tell you right now, that was the plan of Al-Qaeda. The plan of Al-Qaeda was to weaken America to the point where America could no longer project its force outside its borders, right? They wanted to pull us into a war that bankrupt us. And basically, that's why they hit the World Trade Center. They wanted to destroy us economically so that the United States could no longer project force outside of its borders. That sounds a lot the same. That's the same effect isolationism has, whether it's forced to or whether you voluntarily do it. And when you have these influential voices trying to convince you that America first is really American isolationism, they're playing into the hands of our enemies. And that's why our enemies are playing them on state TV. That is why Candace Owens is in Russia right now speaking at a conference, and why she was on Russian television yesterday. So save me with all of this nonsense if you don't know what is going on. Stop letting these people use you, because they're playing you, and it has nothing to do with America first. I'm as America first as it gets. You can't get no more America first than me. I served 22 years, and I bleed this country. I'm a conservative. I'm reformed. I'm Southern Baptist. Like, whatever you want to do. I was circumcised on the 8th day, the tribe of Benjamin. Whatever you want to say, I got the credentials. This is not America first, what they're selling you. What they're selling you is grievance described as liberation, and they're selling you an anti-American position on the guise of this is America first. That's all they're doing. And so I hope you wake up to it. I hope you do and stop falling for this. You're not more awakened because you're of a younger generation. You're just less wise. And you're easily manipulated because you haven't lived long enough. You haven't seen enough. And stop thinking, and I'm going to tell you this. This is my last warning. I'm going to stop. Every generation that goes to the left, is always a youth movement that thinks they know more than their elders. Do not fall for it. You do not know more than the people who came before you. You're not the wisest generation to ever come about, and now all of a sudden you're going to set the world on fire in this new charge, and you don't know. That's why you're falling for it, because you are unwise, because you need to listen to those who have been here longer than you and who have come before you and who have more experience than you. Stop thinking you know it all. You don't. And that's all I say.
Well, now that we should definitely pass the collection plate, I think you hit on a lot of good points and a lot of things that somebody in the chat said we need a part two, that, we definitely are not going to have time because we are not doing a 3-hour show today.
Hey, man, this is Informed Takes. Let's go 3 hours.
The Lord today. I think that there is a lot of propaganda going around. There is a lot of intentional division being pushed. It reminds me of the 30s when there was, this intentional communistic push in our country to bring about a lot of division, to work to bring down America, honestly.
It's called demoralization. You demoralize a whole generation to hate its own country, to hate its own values, to hate itself. Yuri Bezmenov talked about it. We are at it. And the young people are the generation that has been demoralized to hate itself. That's all.
But now, but I'm going to come on behalf of Gen Z. There had to be gatekeepers that were off duty, because you can't get to my kid without me. And so while it's easy to be like, yeah, you don't know it all, and I think that's true, and yeah, you shouldn't believe all the propaganda, I believe that's true too, and yeah, you might need to read a book or 3, that's true too, but I can't just sit back and say, well, it's all Gen Z's fault. Like, at some point we also have to recognize that the gatekeepers of Gen Z didn't do that great of a job, and there was an intentional push to get to Gen Z that many people who sat on these walls just allowed people to get to them. And so now we do have a generation that we see who have gone whole heart into this like anti-Jew, anti-Israel, definitely picking up on the Red Green Alliance mentality. But I can't just be like, well, it's just because you don't know enough. No, I have to look at, well, what was the intentional push that happened to be able to get to them? Who were the gatekeepers that allowed our kids to be taken and or allowed the enemy entrance to our young people? And now how do I have a conversation with them to bring them back?
True. And
it's way more to me than just you need to read a book. I do think, Gen Z, you need to pick up a book, but I also need to look at the millennial, and because my issue, my beef is with the person who allowed that narrative to get to my kid in the first place. And maybe that's me, maybe that's the parent next to me,
I mean, we can have our own issues with the boomers, right? We can
but
have our own
boomers. It's not just boomers.
But it's Gen
X. It's older millennials. Like, it's not just boomers. We can't just now skip over people and act like, let me go all the way back to the boomer.
It is, because that's the generation that dropped the ball. The rest of us were just brought up in it. And now we're like, hold up. Now that we're like really grown adults, we're looking at it like, hold up. How in the world y'all let our institutions get like this? How y'all let all these Marxists come in and create our educational curriculum? Now, yeah, we're pushing back against it now. But the generation that allowed this to happen, and I get why it happened in the 1960s and all that stuff. I get why it happened, but that's how we got here, right? And my issue is not that, the gatekeepers dropped the ball. What I'm talking to Gen Z about is a disposition. They have a very arrogant disposition, and it's the same thing I saw when I look at the film from the 1960s, and I see these young people talking against the older generation because they know better. And they were the generation of revolution, right? And that is how we got here, because they got hoodwinked and bamboozled, felt like they knew, and especially in the Black community, because the Black people were too comfortable and didn't rise up, right? And so all these young Black people now know better, and they're going to rise up, and all these old people who sat here and let this happen. And what you end up realizing 6 decades down the road is, oh yeah, y'all was wrong. You sent us on the worst path, right? And so that's my thing to Gen Z is, slow down. Don't think too highly of yourself. and educate yourself before you get out here thinking that you understand how the world works and that you're some kind of foreign policy, geopolitical experts, because you're not, just because you saw some TikToks. That's all I'm saying.
Sorry.
Oh, let's welcome Krista back to the show.
Krista, welcome back to the show. Now, we do have to wrap. I do want to talk about just a biblical response, because one of the things that, and Krista, I know Krista had a whole show. I'm so sorry, friend. But do you want?
Let's be real. Let's be real. We never get through questions that we draw up. We never do.
Krista, I want to go to a biblical response, because I in my interactions, I think that the impact of this on young people is strong, and I think that young people are very confused. And it's not just a finger wagging, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, Kevin, but I'm just saying, like, what is the biblical response and positioning when we have these conversations? They can be young or old, but my heart is always for the young, like the Gen Z or the generation that's Gen Alpha. Like, how do we have these conversations so that there is an openness to be able to have more dialogue? You know what I mean, Kevin? Or Krista?
Yeah. I'll let Krista go. She's been quiet for a while.
No, go ahead.
I think you do have to be, willing to have conversations. But I'm going to stick with the truth has to be the number one thing that drives us and that we land on, is what is true, not how we feel. And this is what I'll say too: skepticism. I'm trying to figure out how to word it, because there is a healthy skepticism, right? Because you don't just simply believe anything you're told. You're going to go and research and do some homework and make sure what someone says is true. But having what we call like a critical consciousness is, what we would call it, which the political right and a lot of Christians seem to have today, is a critical consciousness. And simply questioning becomes the virtue. We can't go there, right? The goal, has to be to seek truth, but truth is the virtue, not simply questioning. Because you just simply become a questioning people, and I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions. And you never land on answers. You never land on what the truth is. You simply in this cycle of just asking questions. You're not doing the biblical thing, which is standing on what is true. Right. And so that's what I believe has to be first and foremost, is what is true. And that's what we have to seek. And if the truth is what we're both after, then we'll be okay, because it's kind of like when we say, like, scripture is the final authority. If scripture is the final authority and we're as Christians, we should be able to go to the scriptures and say, okay, and we should submit to scripture, because scripture is truth. When it comes to these things, we should be able to land on and submit to what is true, right? And if both parties are willing to do that and have that disposition, then I think we can be okay. But we have to stop. I don't know. It's almost like taking a position. It's like, well, I'm not. It's more of a negative position than is a positive position, if that makes sense. Or you're more against something than you are about what is true. You're just simply standing against something. And a lot of people, when it comes to the Israel issue, have just known to be, I'm against this.
Well, I think that, to go to this commenter's point, who's right now, that young people don't want to and you have forever wars, for example. Okay. You don't want forever wars. All right. But I feel like that group of people who says that talking point never gets to, well, how do we really defend our country? How do we develop friendships with other
Mhm.
countries so that we can protect ourselves? Like that group of people who say that talking point, they never have a geopolitical strategy other than we don't want forever wars. Okay, you don't want forever
Mhm.
wars. Then what are you for? Like,
Yeah.
how do you defend yourself? Like, if a rapist comes into your house, do you tell them, I don't want forever wars in my house? Or do you take the rapist out? Like, there has to be a
Mhm.
conversation that goes beyond our generation is tired of forever wars. And with all due respect, Gen Z, you weren't in the forever wars. Those were the millennials and the Gen Xers.
Ah,
And so I think that, but that crowd doesn't want to offer an alternative strategy,
Yeah.
and they don't seem to have an accurate understanding. They have a lot of talking points, but they don't have an accurate understanding of how the real world works. And so it's not a generational issue. It's an issue of like, okay, you're coming to the discussion, you got a big attitude, you got a lot of words, but you don't seem to have an understanding of things. And
mhm.
so the adults in the room can sometimes get impatient because you're like a 5-year-old and you're telling me that I'm a mechanic, and that you're a 5-year-old telling me I don't know how to fix a car. Like, that's not how the world works. Kevin is an ex-military guy from 20 years. He has a degree in Middle Eastern studies. He didn't just roll out of bed yesterday, watch some TikTok videos, and come on a live stream. He has a background in intelligence as an analyst. So, like, this is where the frustration comes in, is you come on real strong, people come on real strong in the comments, but there's not a lot of context and listening. And
Yeah.
so there is a level of impatience that happens at that point.
Yeah.
I
And
think
that's on me. And it's what you said, Krista, of that's what I was trying to say about it's a negative stance. We don't want any more forever wars. Therefore, that drives my position. That can't be the driving force of the position. What is true has to be the driving force of the position. Not I don't want this, so therefore X. That's not how this works. We can say we don't want any more forever wars. That is a strategy. That is saying, you know what, maybe going in and nation building and these 20-year, 10, 20-year projects, we're not doing that anymore. But that doesn't mean that there's no more military action or that, oh, and that's the propaganda I'm talking about, right? And you guys know I went on my rants about Tucker and Candace, and they're trying to draw us into World War III. And I've been saying for years, y'all, there's no chance of a World War III. It just doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. But they were getting on talking to millions of people and fear mongering people. And they're fear mongering people not because it's true or that they believe it, but because they want to drive and influence U.S. foreign policy. That's what this is all about, right? And so I just want young people to realize, stop getting caught up in the propaganda. I know you don't want forever war. I don't want a forever war. We're not doing that nation building stuff again. That was horrible. And Afghanistan really showed that doesn't work. We can't enforce our way of life and thinking on other people. But at the same time, it's one of those things of, if you don't understand that came from the Bush administration and that came from a certain belief called the democratic peace theory, where the idea was democratic nations don't go to war with one another. So the way we're going to drive world peace and the way we're going to transform the Middle East after this war on terror is we're going to plant democracies and we're going to spread democracy. That was called the democratic peace theory. That was the driving theory of the Bush administration and people like Donald Rumsfeld and I forgot the vice president, Dick Cheney, right? That ideology and that line of thinking does not exist with the current administration, right? And so saying, I don't want to be in a forever war, great. But you need to understand what led to the forever war, the ideology and the thinking and the framework behind that, and realize that is not the framework of the current administration. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, stop being reactionary, stop being in your feelings, stop letting people drive your emotions simply based on this fear mongering. And that's why I do what I do and why I say the things I say is because I see the intentional fear mongering. And the fear mongering, it affects Gen Z. Gen Z is anxious and all of this stuff. Why? Because they're having this fear mongering propaganda pushed in them 24/7 through social media. And all I'm saying is, guys, it's not real. That's not the situation. That's someone pushing propaganda to you to drive your emotions, to drive largely international policy in the direct or U.S. foreign policy in the direction that they want it to go. That's all this is. And so, yeah, this isn't about, oh, I love Israel, therefore Israel has to get all the support and we got to go and fight for Israel. And no, that's not what it is. I want to look at things from an objective position. What is the landscape? What is the geopolitical situation? What are the pros and cons of an Iranian regime? Are they really trying to get nuclear weapons? What happens if they do? Like, those are the things we're thinking about from a national security perspective. And it is national security. It is America first. This is national security. And we're looking at this nation state that is the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world. And we're saying if we can go out and take this nation state out, this regime out in Iran, that cuts off Hamas, that cuts off Hezbollah, that cuts off the last bit of tension in the entire Middle East, because everyone else has made peace with Israel except Iran and the proxies that they fund, the terrorist groups they fund. If we can cut that off, then we can have a true peace in the Middle East. We can divert all of our stuff to the Pacific for China, and we can leave our NATO allies to deal with Russia. If you can't talk about that understanding of a geopolitical position, stop with this whole everything's about Israel. It's not. When the president sits down, he gets his press briefing, his intelligence briefing for the day. This is what's going on in the world. This is the strategy. This is what we're doing. It ain't about Israel. Israel ain't driving this. Stop letting people on social media who don't know anything tell you that. They do not understand how national security, national policy, military strategy, they don't understand any of that. They're simply trying to drive a narrative to you. And so I know we've been going long. We got to end. I'm on my soapbox, but I just want y'all to know that these people are lying to y'all.
Yeah, I mean, we are going long. But I do think that what you're saying is good and true, and it would do some well to really listen. It would also do people well to really get an understanding of history. To get an understanding of Iran, to get an understanding of the Middle East conflict, to get an understanding of how America has participated or not participated in, a lot of these things, because it does go down to how do we protect Americans? How do we protect, our allies? And which is all very important for the protection of the American people. And not just the American people, but how do we protect, or how do we continue to lead as a global leader in the world? And, I know that you guys have been talking about like forever wars and things like that. And, the scripture verse that comes to me is that there will always be wars and rumors of wars. Like, these are things that we see as guaranteed in scripture. And so to say, well, we don't want these forever wars, there's always going to be wars and rumors of wars. There's always going to be these things on the scene. I think what we should be striving for is an understanding of truth and looking at how do we protect our borders? How do we protect America and, our allies and things like that, which is all the things that you're hitting on. I don't know. I keep coming back to this history. Like, there's no reality of 9/11 to understand what we are fighting against.
Yeah.
and the who the real enemy is and why that enemy wants to see us dead. And so it's kind of like, I remember growing up, my mother would always tell me, I need to know if I'm gonna have a fight, I need to know who I'm fighting.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna know who we're fighting, sometimes you swing first. Sometimes you take out the enemy so that they don't come for your family. Like
Yeah.
when I think about it on just the street fight level, it's we have to sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and that's not a hard-heartedness or a carelessness in regards to the innocent life that are put at risk. But even when we think about the innocent life that are put at risk, when we think about Gaza, for example, it was their leadership that put their people at risk, and it's not talked about. And so yeah, this conversation has definitely taken a very interesting turn tonight. I was not expecting this coming into it.
I want to apologize to Krista for hijacking the show. I apologize.
Well, we're here now. So, um,
Part two.
yeah, I don't know what to do. Because we didn't get to the most important part of the conversation. And so I'm just kind of in a dilemma. We're almost at 2 hours.
I mean,
so
this is a live stream. I mean, you guys have to go understand, but the chat is still with us.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
I might need to give me a glass of water though, but go ahead. I need some tea at this point. We're here for it. Go, Krista.
I don't know. I'm tired.
Well, I'm gonna go. If you're not gonna go, I'm gonna go to Mercenaries comment. And I was like, oh, look at that. Where? Let me see if I can find it. But the comment says something to the effect that we've been gentle parenting the world. And I almost fell out my chair. I said, oh, Lord,
that is
here
an
it comes.
accurate.
That is an
very
accurate comment. This is gentle.
Yes.
We just need to be gentle. We need to sometimes you gotta pound some.
And that's one of the things that I talked about. We don't understand how the rest of the world works. And we think the rest of the world is like us. And we just, like the Obama administration, we just give the Iranians this $100 billion and try to bring them, they'll be like us and they'll play along. No, they started enriching uranium, right? They started funding terrorist organizations again at very high levels because now all of a sudden they got $100 billion in cash. And so it's just not understanding how the world works, right? And there are consequences for gentle parenting. There just are. And what this administration is doing, it's like people don't understand what peace through strength is, right? And what this administration is doing is no longer gentle parenting, right? And they're willing to use America's military and economic power for the benefit of America and the benefit of the president's agenda, right? Going down and snatching up Maduro in Venezuela. That was an America first move. Taking out the Iranian leadership. That is an America first move. And to try to frame this stuff as for Israel, it's like that's such a very narrow view of everything this administration is doing. He's not trying to buy Greenland because of Israel. He didn't snatch up Maduro to control the oil in Venezuela for Israel. He's not doing a blockade on Cuba for Israel. Like, this is America's foreign policy strategy, right? And you need to be able to have a thoughtful conversation on everything that is going on instead of trying to frame everything through the lens of Israel, because it just doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. So,
well, let's get into let's get into talking about a point that you raised earlier, and that is the difference between truth and propaganda, because I think that's one of the things that makes it so tricky to even have this conversation. And I know that one of Charlie Kirk's big concerns was that Israel and the MAGA version of the America First strategy was really losing the propaganda war. They're losing the war of public opinion. And I think that Israel, and I think even our own government, all governments engage in propaganda. The question is what propaganda reflects reality, what part of it is true. And that's not always easy for the average person to get to really know and differentiate between what is fake or false propaganda and what is the truth. And so I want to play the next clip from Dr. Jeff and then come back and talk a little bit more about this, because the way that um, it's being, a lot of these ideas are being processed in the public square, it really makes it difficult because we don't know how to differentiate what is real and what is fake propaganda. So let's check out the clip.
So I know Charlie Kirk, before he passed away or was murdered, had concerns. And he wrote a letter to Benjamin Netanyahu stating his concerns that Israel was losing the war of public opinion. And and he kind of gave some, hey, this could help. Yeah. And Charlie's concern was it was the young people. And Charlie wanted to reach the young people. And you mentioned even when we started that there's a lot of misinformation out there that people believe. Kind of go into that and kind of explain, like, what is this misinformation that people are believing? Why is Gen Z, believing these things today?
Yeah. Well, I think the term I want to use, and I'll define it, is the term propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
So persuasion is giving someone ethical arguments to try to move them toward the truth.
Yeah.
Propaganda is using ethical arguments or unethical arguments to gain power over the hearer. So persuasion is about the truth, propaganda is about power.
Yeah.
Those are the big differences. Why do people, so many people fall for propaganda? I think first of all, they're predisposed to think that they know better. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's honestly, there's sort of a relativistic narcissism that is at the core of a lot of things today.
Yeah.
People will tell you, well, I did the research, I'm bringing the receipts. What do they even mean by that? That they've looked at the first 3 search results on a Google search page, let's be honest.
Yes.
Right? They are not informed about this. They don't even try to be informed. They take some kind of an existing prejudice and then use that as the basis for the way they see everything else.
Yeah.
That's not research, that's not thought, that's narcissism. Yeah. That's, I am the center of my reality. I get to define reality for myself. And I'm just telling you what my reality is.
Yeah.
Okay? So those people are almost 100% open to being targeted by propaganda. Because whatever they hear, if it's not something that other people are saying, they automatically assume that it's true and that they are now smarter than everybody else because they have this new revelation.
Yes.
Now, and I'll be straightforward with you, and Charlie and I had a show on his podcast about this, and I don't think he would agree with the way I just framed that. But I have spent hundreds of hours with young adults going over all of these questions. And it's the first thing you have to struggle to do is get to a basis of factual reality. So we actually know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think that's where the propaganda comes from. I would say Christians are sometimes most susceptible because we assume that we'll feel what is true. And you don't always feel what is true.
Yeah.
But if you believe that you feel what is true, and then you see somebody showing pictures of children who look hungry, their apartment building got knocked down by a bomb.
Yeah.
How could your heart not be moved in compassion toward those people?
Yeah.
And it could actually cause you to short circuit some of the tough questions you got to ask, like, what is a just war? Is this war just? Are there parts of it that are just and parts that are unjust?
Yeah.
Those are very complicated questions that don't yield themselves very easily to how I feel about things.
Yeah. I want to just jump in, and I love the fact that he brought up what is a just war at the end. And that's something I think that we don't talk about enough is there ever a time when war is just? What is just war? It's a whole theory. Like there's books written on just war theory.
Yeah, we did a whole show on just war theory about a year and a half ago. So it's a whole thing. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I wish that we had more time to even go into just war theory. And maybe that's something we can revisit in the future to talk about, hey, when is the use of war or physical force in that fashion just, and we're able to defend that position biblically and through a perspective of protecting our national borders, or whatever else it comes in with that. I don't know what were you going to say, Krista?
I think that the tricky part with just war theory, in my opinion, is that it's not always easy to determine whether something is a just war. And in these days, it's also not always easy to determine when a war comes to an end. And that's a big pillar of just war theory. I think that one of the difficulties, like, I'm not, to be honest, I'm not a fan of how Trump is handling the situation in Iran. I kind of supported it for the first few weeks, but my support for it is quickly waning because I don't think that he's managing it very well. And I do have some concerns about his strategy. I understand, theoretically the importance of what we're doing there, but I have a lot of questions about what's happening. But I also know that they can't tell the public everything of what's going on behind the scenes. But I think that we can start off even in a just war situation, and then it can drag on, and then it becomes very unjust, and it can have mission drift. I think that these things are very tricky, and I think that there are it's I wish that Trump was doing more to help the Iranian people. And that was really what we started out with it as. But that really hasn't materialized. And there's all these side issues and side conversations. And I do have some concerns about all of that. But I think that the questioning of what are we doing in our relationship with Israel, like, I can be on board with it from a geopolitical standpoint. I am more agnostic about it from a biblical standpoint, but I can also admit, like, hey, we're getting down the road here that this doesn't seem like it's a good idea anymore, and things feel very unclear. And I can understand the disenfranchisement that some people have with that kind of conflict. I don't know.
Yeah. But it's one of those things of, it can't be, well, I don't like how this is going, I'm tired of this, just end it. Like, you can't, it can't, we have to have some type of strategy and positive outcome for the future, for it even to have been, I don't want to say worth it, but you have to have an executable strategy at the end. And I'm second.
He didn't come undone.
What happened?
I don't know. Oh, he came undone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
My back?
Yeah.
Okay, my mic came unplugged. My I lost my train of thought. We were talking about, I wanted to get the just war theory. That's what I wanted to get to. In terms of, I think we have a generation that doesn't, that is kind of a missing piece to what's going on. Because I saw in the chat someone mentioned, hey, global war on terrorism, we killed over 1 million people. My response is, and that doesn't tell me anything. That's a number, and you can feel a certain way. You can say, oh, that's tragic. But the question is, were we just in waging the war on terror after 9/11? That's the question. And it's the thing too, like, when you're in a position of leadership, when you're, George Bush after 9/11, and you're dealing with what just happened in New York. You've got 3,000 Americans dead. You've got 2 buildings knocked down, the Pentagon hit, and another plane in the ground. What's your response? What do you do? Right? It's easy to have hindsight for this young generation and be like, I'm tired of forever wars. But we didn't fly planes into our own buildings. Someone else did. Right? And as leaders of a nation, we had to respond. And the way to respond to that was the war on terror, which was designed to not only track down and take out those responsible, but the plan was, and the vision was, to reshape that part of the world in a way to which that ideology doesn't get a chance to thrive anymore. That strategy, it didn't work, but at the same time, we also haven't had another 9/11, right? So something went right with that. And I would tell the younger generation, be grateful for that. Instead of living in this, it's almost a holier than thou mentality of we would have done better, we would have done differently. Like, no, we had to respond to getting attacked. And this is the thing, and this is, I'm going short history, but people don't understand. And this is one of the reasons the Israel thing is very important, because a lot of this is centered around Israel and the Arab rejection and anger over Israel. And not just the state of Israel existing, that's part of it, but it's just the existence of Jews. Like, there's just a hatred of the Jewish people and the nation state of Israel they want to destroy. And what keeps them from destroying it, or what they feel keeps them from destroying it, is the United States of America, right? And so, but you had this long line of terrorist attacks and terrorist bombings in Israel. You had the bombing in Lebanon of the Marine barracks. You had the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993. You had the bombing of our embassies in Africa and Tanzania. You had the USS Cole, in Yemen, where they bombed our ship and killed, many sailors. You had all of these incidents over time where the United States did little or nothing in response. We just kind of played it off, or we're not going to worry about that. We're just not going to do this, right? Until 9/11 happened. And the problem got to a point where we say, okay, we can't ignore it anymore. What are we going to do about these people who have waged war on us? We ain't studying them. We have not waged war on them. We haven't done anything to them. Oh yeah, I forgot about Khobar Towers, where they killed over 200 airmen in Saudi Arabia, simply because they were upset that we were in the Middle East and what they call holy ground. Not to mention the fact the Saudi government is who brought us in to push Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. The terrorists, the Al-Qaedas, the Bin Ladens of the world says, we are infidels, we're on holy ground, and so they bombed us, right? That's what we're talking about. That's what we were fighting. And we ignored it up until the point we couldn't ignore it anymore. And so we fought a war against those people. And it's hard because we're not talking about a country. We're talking about terrorist groups in multiple different countries and all this type of stuff. And so it wasn't an easy answer. It wasn't an easy response, right? And those in charge did the best they could at the time with the information they had on how to protect America and America's interest around the world.
But Kevin, I think that, like, your comment about, like, so what, that 1 million people died or however many, I mean, that's pretty rough. I think that's a really rough posture to take. And I think that, like, there were so many mistakes made in the Afghan-Iraq war. I mean, there's so many things that happened where there was mission drift, and we tried to engage in this weird, like, installing a democracy, a Jeffersonian democracy in the Middle East, and not having an understanding of cultural issues. Like, there are so many things that we did wrong. Like, I think we're so far from just war theory at that point. Like, maybe what was true at the beginning of the Iraq war in 2003 quickly ran amok. And we all know that like the whole weapons of mass destruction narrative, like nobody believes that anymore. And that was supposedly like the big warrant for going in there. I mean, like we can't act so puritanical as to like, hey, we did everything right. And it's had
No, it's not about we did everything right.
devastating consequences on so many of the vets that went through it, yourself included. I mean, but your comment is just extremely confusing that, like, oh, 1 million people died. So what?
Yeah, because the number isn't important. If it was 10,000, would there be a difference? If it was 100,000, like what's the number to where it's problematic? The issue isn't the number of people who died. The issue is, was the United States just in going to war, right? And did we carry out the war in a just way? And that's another thing I'll get at too, because as someone who has targeted and who has been responsible for taking lives and dropping bombs and all of this type of stuff, you have no idea the lengths we go through to avoid civilian casualties in everything that we do, right? And that's I think that's one of the issues I'm PO'd about the propaganda and the narrative, because, and I've said this before, the United States and Israel get held to a level that no one else has ever held to, right? How many rockets did Iran fire into Israel that wasn't at military targets? How many rockets did Hamas and Hezbollah fire into Israel that wasn't at military targets? Did anybody say anything? Not at all. But the minute we make a mistake and accidentally hit a building or something that we weren't supposed to, these same people freak out. We held to a standard of perfection, even though we jumped through every hoop to avoid civilian casualties, not to target, to hold to the Geneva Convention, to only go out to military targets. And yet we get held to a standard. And it's because of the propaganda that is portrayed through the media from anti-war people, right? They don't care about right and wrong. They only care about it when it's us and it's something they can capitalize on to exploit it in the media, and people fall for it. But they say nothing when Iran launches 300 ballistic missiles at Israel and hits neighborhoods and communities, and they say nothing. They say there's no outrage, there's no nothing. And so it's like, that's why I'm saying, like, it's not about the principle of right and wrong. It's simply a matter of preference and propaganda. So when I say 1 million people, so what? It's not about it's flippant. I'm saying the number doesn't make it right or wrong. The number doesn't justify in the analysis of, was the United States right or just to go to war after 9/11? And I think it's hard to argue that the United States wasn't just in going after the various elements throughout the world that led to 9/11. And so when we talk about just war theory, that's what we're talking about. But people get so caught up in the destruction or the loss of life. Like, yes, that's war. That is war. War is not good. War is not nice. War is not cute. War is not for social media. War is not on TikTok. War is ugly and the epitome of the fall of man, when nation goes to war and is man killing man. But there are times when it is needed and there are times when it is just. And for you to just sit on the sidelines and act like holier than thou because we went to war, but yet you're silent when the other side is beheading children and strapping bombs to women who are disabled so they can walk into a market and detonate them, and you got nothing to say about that, but you got something to say about me for trying to save the people in the market. You better get off your high horse. Get off your high horse. We are not the enemy. You haven't seen the world. You haven't seen ugliness. October 7th, did you see those videos when they were beheading those Israelis, when they were doing those things to those? It's ugly. You have no idea what the world looks like because you're stuck at Starbucks on your iMac.
Have you ever been to war, Kevin? Kevin, you ever been to war? You ever seen hard things?
I have seen hard things, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. War. I have friends that have PTSD. Matter of fact, I'm starting a program in 5 days to help veterans deal with the consequences of things that we saw, things that we dealt with. It's not that it's easy. It's not easy. The world is fallen. But this is what you need to understand. There are people in this world who hate you. And there are people in this world who want to kill you. When they chant death to Israel, when they chant death to America, you need to believe them when they're enriching uranium for a nuclear weapon at 60%.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you doing? Why are you sitting over here acting like we're the enemy? We're trying to save your behind. And the only thing you're doing is going and siding with the enemy. For the people, the same people who want to destroy your civilization. And we're the bad guys. Israel's the enemy. I'm telling you, you're being hoodwinked and bamboozled. And it's the same thing when Bill Maher asked Anna Kasparian, because she's all anti-Israel. And he's like, would you live in Israel or would you go live in a Muslim country? Guess what her answer was? Israel. Duh. AOC, hypocritical behind all this women's rights and all this kind of stuff. She goes and she talks to Muslims. What does she do? She puts on a hijab. She covers her head. She submits. And she's supposed to be the radical feminist leftist. These people have no principles. They have no principles. And what I'm telling you is you need scripture tells us this. Be wise as serpents, be innocent as doves. You can't just be focused on being an innocent dove and not be wise as a serpent. You have to understand the world in which we live in. And you have to understand that there are forces. I have worked in intelligence. I have seen the reports of how Russia is trying to influence not just U.S. politics, but just U.S. culture in general, right? You are being fed something. Your algorithm is not real. They want you to see certain things. They're trying to shape the way you think. These influencers are not in Russia for no reason. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. We are having this discussion and we're fighting and tearing ourselves apart. That's not a coincidence. They want us fighting each other because you can't bring down America from the outside. You have to bring it down from the inside. And so what I'm saying is stop being hoodwinked and bamboozled. Stop being led by your feelings and stop having this revisionist history of the past. Because one day, and I pray to God it doesn't happen, but one day your generation is going to have to make a decision on what to do with something. And it can't be, oh, let's just sing Kumbaya. No, there are times where people who want to kill you and you got to kill them. And that is brutal and that is harsh. And we're like Christians, like, oh my goodness, but that is the world. We do not live in utopia, and utopia is not possible. It is not. Read a history book from Genesis on up to the day. You will not find any peaceful utopia. As a matter of fact, you live in the most peaceful time in human history today. Mm-hmm. And yet you're disgruntled, you're angry, you're bitter, you're ungrateful, you're judgmental, and you've got all the freedom and luxuries that people in the past would love to have. And you're just bitter and angry. Where do you think that came from? People are feeding that to you through your social media algorithm. Look, I know I have a military background. I know I have certain training to see the world a certain way that the average person doesn't have. But what I'm saying is, do not be naive to the world. Do not be naive to the way the rest of the world thinks or the way the rest of the world sees you. I get this final example. There was this couple, they were very naive, and they felt like all this stuff was overblown. We're all people of the world, is all love. And they decided to ride their bikes across the country, across the world, and go through Muslim countries, those people were killed and beheaded, right? We have humanitarian workers who get kidnapped in places like Africa, and then we have to go in and save them. Who saves them? We do. They're humanitarian aid workers kidnapped, murdered. All kinds of things happen to them that I can't say on YouTube. And who has to go in and get them? We do. Where was the last rescue operation from a Muslim country? We go in and get them. We're the ones fighting the bad guys. We're not the bad guys. You want to know bad guys? Go and leave the United States. Go to the rest of the world. Go to Sudan. Talk to people in Nigeria. Talk to Christians in Nigeria being murdered and bombed and churches being burned down. Man, don't come to me with that. All right. That's it.
I do want to say that the young man who's been commenting during the stream, I guess I have a very different take than you do, Kevin. And maybe this is just because I'm a woman and I want to give you space to be a man and have the man-to-man conversation. I guess for me,
I would say I have not been able to read. I can't see the chat. I had not been able to read it, so I don't know what was being said.
This young man's in a lot of pain. His father was a vet, and his father was damaged in the war, and he's trying to make sense of a world where his father was sent to war under false pretenses and the weapons of mass destruction narrative we all know is a lie.
Yeah.
And he's in pain and he's trying to make sense of it.
Okay.
And the way you're coming off is pretty dismissive.
Okay. Like I said, I can't see the chat well enough to read it, and so this is what I will say, because like I say, I have a program starting in 5 days. That is a program to help veterans who have been struggling. It's called the Brotherhood, and we're launching our first cohort in 5 days to help veterans who are struggling in these areas. This is what I'll say. When you sign up for this to serve in the military, it's voluntary service, and we all sign up to serve our country, and to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And this is the thing, we know that it can cost us everything, even our lives. And that's something that we raise our hand, we sign up for, and we go do. In terms of the Afghanistan war, we know what led to that. If you want to understand the Iraq war, every war that we go into has to be justified to the public, because we don't have a dictatorship, regardless of what people say. We have to win, and that's public opinion matters. Congressional approval or congressional, at least buy-in to some degree, matters. And so the government always has to come up with a narrative of justification for why they want to do military action. Even in this Iran war, you heard a lot about the nuclear weapons. You heard a lot about the enrichment. You heard a lot. They have to justify why they're sending forces. The Iraq war, they chose to go with the weapons of mass destruction narrative. The reality is, as I tried to explain earlier, the whole purpose of the Iraq war was for the purpose of putting in a democracy in the Middle East, to try to change the landscape of the Middle East. If you go back and listen to President Bush's war on terror speech shortly after 9/11, it was very somber. And I remember him talking about this war is not just a war of today. He said, this is a war of our children and a war of our grandchildren. He wasn't thinking simply about the moment. He was thinking bigger picture. How do we address this to where our kids don't have to deal with this? Your father went to war to create a world to where you don't have to, where our grandkids, because we kept kicking the can down the road on this stuff. We kept kicking the can down the road, and eventually we was like, we got to fight this war, whether we want it or not. And the strategy they chose was the spread of democracy. We're going to go in, we're going to change the Middle East, we're going to put in democracy, we're going to put in, free enterprise and freedom of speech and liberty, and we're going to, these closed societies where this terroristic ideology grows, we're going to go and not let that happen anymore, right? It was naive. It was misguided from a understanding culture standpoint to think that we could go into a, I'll put it like this, that we could go into a nation that was under a strong-arm dictator to where the minority dominated the majority. So the minority group, the Sunnis, dominated the majority group, the Shias, with a heavy fist. And we felt that we could go in there. And yeah, we're gonna be seen as liberators because the majority of the people in Iraq were oppressed under Saddam Hussein. They were the Shias. And yeah, they cheered when we came down the street. But that didn't last long because when you put in democracy and you flip the power structure and now the majority is in charge, who's been under the thumb of someone else for decades, all of a sudden they want vengeance. And all of a sudden, the people who used to be in charge want to be in charge again. And so you have a civil war breakout. And so now we're in this country trying to rebuild it, and we're in the middle of a civil war. And yeah, it got ugly, and it was hard to deal with. If I guarantee you, we can go back and do it, we wouldn't have done it. We would have came up with a different strategy to combat Islamic jihadism. But that was what the people at the time decided to do, and it was wrong. But no one chose that moment. No one chose 9/11. No one chose to have to be in a seat where they have to make a decision on that. And it's heavy. It's heavy when any president has to send troops in harm's way. And it's not something that is taken lightly. But I can tell you as someone who served that is what we sign up to do. We sign up to defend this nation. And not just for ourselves, we do it for our kids. We do it for the next generation. So your father, I mean, I as someone who served, I want to thank him for his service. And he sacrificed a lot. He sacrificed a lot, but he did it. And we all did it so that you wouldn't have to.
So Kevin, this young man is still here. I just want to ask a couple follow-up questions, and then we got to do the wrap. This is like taking forever. But I guess my heart just goes out to this young man because he does seem sincere. He doesn't seem like a troll. He seems like he's really trying to make sense of things. And so I'm giving extra time in this. And I want him to understand that we are giving extra time and extra forbearance because of the situation. But he says, like, he has I think I'm going to take this as a good faith, sincere question. He says, okay, so if I think, Kevin, you're admitting that the weapons of mass destruction narrative is fake. Like, we know that. Like,
I put like this. There's evidence that, put like this. It was the threat of it was exaggerated. I do believe they believed they were going to find some weapons of mass destruction there because we knew Saddam Hussein had them, and even Saddam Hussein himself acted as if he had them.
Okay.
I wasn't in the military at the time, but just from people I've talked to who were in the intelligence community, there's a strong theory that those weapons of mass destruction left the country before we came in.
Okay. But we all know that the government lies to us sometimes because they have to put up a public narrative. You've worked in intelligence, you know that.
Yes.
But do you think that, like, I think that the concern is, how do we know that the government is not lying to us now, like with going into Iran, that, well, is there really a warrant for going into Iran? And I think that your answer to that would be, yes, we have good evidence that they were creating military grade nuclear weapons and that those could have harmed us. And because they have a kind of an eschatology, a theology of killing us, like this is what they want to do. It is a self-protective strategy to go in there.
Yeah. So when it comes to this, we need to understand about uranium, enriching uranium. When you're talking about civilian use, nuclear power, stuff like that, and uranium is only rich to like 3 to 5%. That's the only thing you have to enrich it to. The only reason to enrich it past that is for military use. And so the fact that the Iranians themselves have admitted that they have uranium at 60%, there's only one reason to do that, and that is to make a nuclear weapon. And so regardless of what we think about it, this isn't the weapons of mass destruction thing all over again. Now, you can argue the timeline. How close were they? Did we have to do it now? Could we have waited 2 years before we did? Like, whatever it is, but it was going to have to be done at some point because they were committed to building the nuclear weapon. And so it's one of those things of, and this is what I say about a lot of 2020 and COVID and the lies of COVID, and even you can go back to the weapons of mass destruction thing has really broken people to really distrust our institutions. And I get that. And you shouldn't just take things at face value. But at the same time, it can't be everything. The starting point is everything that I'm told is a lie. And therefore I believe nothing. And so as I said before, in an attempt to never be fooled again, people have become fools. Because their whole position is, I'm never going to be tricked again. And so they don't know what to believe. And that's a part of the demoralization that Yuri Bespinal was talking about in terms of how do you break down a society when no one is really able to understand what is true. And so that's why we work really hard here to talk about, okay, what is true? And if you want to understand when the government says something, you're going to have to evaluate it yourself. I'm not saying, hey, just trust anything, because the government does have to sell the public on why we need military action. But you have to evaluate, okay, is this true or not? Or is this a real threat or not? And I think this is what I would say too. Our European allies have not, they're not quick to go to war. They don't like to go to war. They don't like it. They're very much like the political left in America. And when we struck Iran this time and took out their leadership, the number of statements that were put out by European leaders, including Canada and Germany, who we know we've had issues with, President Trump has had confrontations with, put out very strong statements of this needed to happen. Like, this is a real threat. The problem is they see threats and they don't know how to deal with them. And then we go in and deal with it. And then they either support us or they distance themselves from it. But at the end of the day, they're always glad we did it. And this is one of those cases. And so I don't think this current Iran thing, we can't make everything 2003 weapons of mass destruction. Everything isn't that.
So let me say this, because Monique wants me to do the wrap, but I promised this young man that we would do one more question, and he said this is his last question. But I do want to encourage you. Like, we had somebody on the stream. I don't know what your name is because you're anonymous here, but there was someone on the stream that if Kevin is willing, he said if someone on the stream is willing to sponsor your dad for Kevin's program for vets. He's starting a thing in the next few days of trying to encourage vets and those who are struggling with things like PTSD. I know you said your dad is struggling. If he just wants some fellowship, email us at info@centerforbiblicalunity.com and we will figure this out. Like, and I just want to say personally, as the producer on this show, like, we don't always know at first, when somebody shows up in the chat where they're coming from. I think you came on pretty strong, and so I thought you were a troll at first, but I can see that you're a very sincere young man who really loves your dad, and your dad's in a tough place. So, like, let us try to just tell you with all sincerity that we're really trying to build a bridge here. Yeah. So I think that these are tough issues, and I think we've both made mistakes. You were stereotyping us as old people. We were stereotyping you as a young person. So we can all admit all of that and really try to humanize each other. Okay. So Kevin, for the last question for this young man, and then we're going to do the wrap. But he wants your opinion of Tulsi. What are your thoughts about Tulsi and her and Kent as being in the intelligence community and them saying Iran is not a threat? Like, what is your thoughts about Tulsi's POV and her come from?
Yeah, I would say with Kent was, I think he was Homeland Security chief or something like that. His area of responsibilities is not foreign threats, foreign power. There's a lot of in the know that he would not have. It's just not in his wheelhouse. Tulsi, and I have to see what Tulsi has said recently. The last thing I heard her say was in agreement with the Iranian threat. This is what I'll say about Tulsi. I like Tulsi. I've always thought, even when she was a Democrat, that she was one of the more level-headed Democrats. But with that said, she was still a Democrat, and she was still very anti-war, if I can say that. Even though she served in the military, she was shaped very heavily by 2003 weapons of mass destruction situation. And I'll say this too. Tulsi was not in Intel. Tulsi, she got this position as being in charge of Intel, but Tulsi's military career was like journalism. Like she wasn't in Intel. She didn't have a top secret clearance or anything like that. And so a lot of her positions before now were simply shaped on how she felt, not really on an informed position. I was for her being the DNI because I've always felt like people have their positions, but the minute they get an intelligence brief and they get told the truth, they tend to change. We saw that with President Obama. He was all about closing Gitmo and ending all these wars. And the minute he got in the seat and he got an intelligence briefing of the situation, all of a sudden his tune changed because it's just more complicated than you think in your ideology of, I want to end this. We need to end this. And so I like Tulsi. I don't think she's dishonest. I think she's an honest person, but she's always been more left-leaning liberal when it comes to military action. And so I've always taken her in that position. I know that's where she leans. And so, but the last thing I saw, if I remember correctly, she was being grilled in front of Congress, and she was backing the president's position because they were trying to call her on saying that she was contradicting the president, and she was clarifying her statement as something. I don't remember the details. I just remember her clarifying her statement and saying that she wasn't contradicting the president. She was speaking from a different capacity or angle, whatever her reasoning was. And so, yeah, I like Tulsi as a person. I think she's an honest person, but I also know she leans anti-military action, regardless of what it is. And so that's her bent.
Okay, very good. So, Kevin, as we think about propaganda versus persuasion in Dr. Jeff's last comment that he made, I guess for me, a lot of that results in, where are you getting your news sources? That's a conversation you and I have had a lot offline, is like, you telling me you got to get better news sources. And I'm like, well, how do I know who's telling the truth? And I think one of the things I've used to gauge is like, who seems to have the most accurate information over the years, and like looking for trend lines and patterns over time. But I know that a lot of people just get their news sources, honestly, from viral videos and that kind of a thing. But it's really tough these days to know what's real when we hear about, a bombing and a bunch of civilians were killed. It's really hard to know, well, is that really what happened? Like, what was the context and all of that? I don't know if you could speak to that at all.
Yeah. Just know the source. When the Gaza Health Ministry puts out something, I'm going to be skeptical about the truthfulness of it because I know they're known for exaggeration and propaganda. Or when something hasn't been corroborated. Like, for instance, something happens and all of a sudden there's all this reporting and people throwing out numbers. And I'm just like, how can you even have numbers that soon? Like, it's just, there's this rush to information. So what I would tell people is just wait for judgment before you make a decision on what you're believing, especially when something first happens. Just sit back and wait and let the smoke clear. Um, and there's no perfect source, so you have to look at multiple sources, and you just have to ask good questions. The Associated Press and Reuters, they have their biases. They're center left, but I want an article that's just going to tell me what happened. Tell me the facts. Stay away from opinionated stuff. Stay away from the opinion column in the Washington Post or all these articles that have been written. Just what happened on this day. This happened. I got this quote from a source on the ground. You just want the news. Just tell me what happened, and I can make my own determination of what I think about it. But don't try to sway how I'm thinking, how I'm supposed to think about or see this thing. And so, yeah, you're gonna have to broaden your horizon. I'm not saying only listen to Fox News and the Daily Wire, but you need to listen to Fox News and the Daily Wire. Al Jazeera, even though they're extremely biased and funded by Qatar, sometimes they do good journalism work. It's just you just have to. Is what I'm reading being honest with me, or is it trying to lead me in a certain direction? Is it leaving out key information? And those are just you just have to think critically. And when you read across a wide variety of sources on a particular issue, you can have a better informed opinion rather than whatever is in your algorithm that is feeding you a particular narrative.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be honest, with my social media, I get more social media from things I disagree with because I interact a lot with things I disagree with. So my social media doesn't feed me a lot of pro or right-wing conservatism. I get more things that make me want to interact with it because it's things I disagree with or push back on than I do in terms of an echo chamber of agreement. But most people's social media feed is an echo chamber of agreement and things they like and viewpoints they already agree with. And so just be leery of that. Know that your social media, regardless of what it looks like, isn't real life. And step out of that echo chamber and breathe a little bit and get in the real world and try to back out of that some. And that helps bring clarity as well.
A service that I really appreciate is ground.news.
Yes.
It has stories and it'll tell you like if it's left leaning or right leaning or centrist, but it also helps you identify blind spots in your feed of like, hey, there's all these news stories on this topic that your feed isn't giving you. And it's kind of useful. Our friend Chuck Holton has good kind of daily streams on geopolitical stuff. And he's pretty critical of Trump at times. He's a pretty straight shooter. I appreciate that. And so
Chuck's one of the best sources out there. Chuck is a former Army Ranger. Chuck knows his stuff and he's very objective. Very objective.
Yeah. All right, friends, it's been a long show. Thanks for hanging in there with us. And I do want to thank the young man who was a commenter tonight in the second half of the show. Thanks for engaging with us. We appreciate it. And hopefully this can all be a learning experience for all of us in humanizing each other and doing better as brothers and sisters in the Lord. So thank you, everyone. And we will be off next week. We will be dark, but we will be back in 2 weeks with, let's see, what are we doing in 2 weeks?
Conversation, I believe, with Honcho.
With Katie Faust.
Oh, Katie Faust. Okay.
About overturning Obergefell. And
yes.
Since it's Pride Month, an appropriate topic of her work, of the Greater Than campaign. So we'll be talking about that in 2 weeks. So we will be off next week, and we will see you, God willing, on June 15th. Thanks so much for watching. Grace and peace, everyone.
Bye, guys.